I'll always remember the first moose I ever saw. He was a mature bull with a huge rack of antlers. He made a large wake as he swam across the stream in front of our boat. That was in the late 1950s. Moose were not so plentiful in Maine as they are today. One of my uncles used to tell us kids that moose lived around there, not far from the state capitol at Augusta, but my cousins and I thought he was kidding. Of course we always looked, just in case, when he said that we might see a moose come out of some woods or in some bog or beside some pond. But I never thought I'd ever see a real live moose up close and personal. And then, one late summer day, that big bull moose made a believer out of me. I still remember how the sight of that wonderfully wild creature made me feel. It's easy to remember because it's the same way that I feel today whenever I get close to one of these splendid critters. There's just something about them. You just have to love moose. Moose watching is a rapidly growing pursuit, and it's easy. Depending on where you go, you won't have to hike miles or climb mountains to see a moose. You might not even have to get out of the car. One note of caution: you should always respect wildlife's needs for a little peace and space. With an animal as large as a moose, that's important for your own safety as well. You should know that mother moose are very protective, and that bull moose, although usually pretty laid back, become aggressive in the fall. You can most easily find moose from late spring to early summer as they feed at ponds, bogs, and lakes. That's also, unfortunately, when they're molting or shedding their winter coats. Except for the calves, which are born in late May and early June, moose are not so attractive from May to late June. From late June on, they look pretty good. Well, pretty good for a moose. Let's see if we can find your basic moose. Say you walk out to the edge of a woodland pond in moose country one morning. You look around the pond, but there's no moose there. Then all of a sudden, the rock in front of you moves. You've just found your first moose. And let's say that you wait at that pond for a while. You might be surprised at just how many moose show up.
1, 2, 3, the whole family.
Some of them may be more accepting of humans than others. Some may even be curious about you. Some moose seem to enjoy people watching. And you won't need a professional camera to get a good picture. The word moose means twig eater in Native American Algonquin language. If you ever get to watch a moose strip the woods, you'll appreciate the aptness of that name. How many twigs can a twig eater eat? About 50 pounds a day. And what do they eat? You might be surprised. Moose love browse, the tender shoots and leaves of trees and shrubs. They eat willows and aspens, birch and maple, mountain ash and pin cherry, and even Christmas trees, balsam fir, which is the mainstay of their winter diet. They also chow lots of aquatic plants, especially during the spring and summer. Aquatic plants like pondweed, yellow pond lily, arrowhead, burrweed, and sweet-scented water lily are all on the moose menu. Where would you go if you were an alien from space and you wanted to find a lot of humans to watch? A fast food place at noon, right? Well, if you're looking for a moose to watch, head for a pond in moose country. Of course, there are a few things that it helps to know. The first thing it helps to know is where. Moose country in North America includes most of Canada, Alaska and Maine, regions of Idaho, Minnesota, Montana, New Hampshire, Utah, and Wyoming, and parts of Colorado, North Dakota, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin. Canada has the greatest number of moose. Moose thrive in the Northwest Territories, in northern Alberta, in northern Ontario, in the Yukon, and on the island province of Newfoundland. In the United States, Alaska has the most moose of any state. But if you live east of the Mississippi, and even if you don't, it pays to know that Maine has more moose per square mile than any other place in North America. Some good places to watch moose are Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, Baxter State Park in Maine, Denali National Park in Alaska, Isle Royale National Park in the Michigan waters of Lake Superior, and Yellowstone National Park, which includes parts of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. There are many other possible moose watching hotspots in moose country. Folks at any store, restaurant, or lodging should be able to direct you to local hotspots. Most will be bogs, ponds, or shallow lakes in backwoods areas. The next thing to know is what time of year. Moose hang out in different places as the seasons come and go. They are most easily found from late spring to midsummer as they feed on aquatic vegetation at ponds, bogs, and lakes. In August, moose seem to stick to the woods more. Studies show that moose prefer softwood cover, especially spruce and fir, later in the summer. You'll still catch moose at ponds, but you may have to work harder. The best thing to do is to look for signs of recent moose activity. We'll talk about moose sign in a minute. In September, moose sometimes go back to their spring and summer feeding spots. Part of the reason for that is that moose are looking for other moose themselves. The moose mating season is about to start. If it makes sense to a moose to look for a moose there, it makes sense for a human too. In winter, moose hang around the edges of clear-cut patches and other forest regeneration areas. They also prefer the cover of softwood-hardwood mixed areas in the winter. The next thing to know is what time of day. Moose are most likely to be seen at feeding sites early in the morning, from noon to 2 in the afternoon, and again late in the afternoon. One study of moose habits found that the highest use of ponds in June and July was from noon to 2. What does that mean? It means that moose are a lot like you and I. They like to eat several meals a day. That's worth remembering when you're looking for a moose to watch. The next thing to know is that those with the greatest patience see the most moose. If your moose hotspot is empty, don't rush off. Give it some time. Enjoy the scenery. Moose watching requires persistence. Sometimes it seems to involve waiting in the wrong place. But be patient, because just when you think that it's time to go look somewhere else.
Oh my gosh! Look at this.
We said earlier that looking for moose sign can help you to find a moose. What is moose sign? Look for moose scat, moose tracks, and evidence of moose feeding. Look for this sign along roads. Look for it on woods trails and on the moose paths that you find around ponds and bogs. Moose scat is best described as prodigious piles of pellets, which we're not showing here for some obvious reasons. Just use your imagination. The pellets are usually oblong, about 1.5 inches long by 3/4 of an inch wide. You'll know moose scat when you see it, trust me. Moose tracks are usually two-toed, up to 6 inches long by 4 inches wide. They're pointed towards the front. The much smaller dew claws or rear toes of each moose foot may show in some tracks if the moose sank into soft earth or snow. Sign from moose feeding takes several forms. Moose strip the bark off of trees. They browse on twig ends and stems. These signs are most obvious in early spring or in winter. Look for moose tracks and scat nearby as a check. A clue may be the height of the sign. Moose can reach higher than the deer or snowshoe hare that eat the same things. You might also look for moose beds at any time of year. These are depressions about 5 feet in diameter found in grassy patches or in the snow. Again, check for fresh scat nearby. A seasonal moose sign to look for is the fresh scars made by the bull moose as they work their antlers against trees in late summer as they prepare for the rut. Which brings us to the most exciting part of the moose year, crazy season. The moose mating season occurs in early fall. Some old moose hands call the few weeks from mid-September to mid-October crazy season. Why crazy season? First, because as they scour the woods in a frenzied, biologically driven search for a mate, bull moose show little fear of the rest of the world, not to mention much respect for it. Their annually grown antlers have developed into hardened bone. They now use those impressive racks to tear things up, either for practice or just out of plain cussedness. They'll battle with shrubs and trees and road signs and fence posts, and sometimes even an unlucky car or truck. At the same time, the cows start to wander the woods as their hormones take control. Moose calves of the year dutifully follow along. Bulls may challenge each other in a shoving match or even a full-blown antler-bashing confrontation. Most bull-moose challenges are bluffing contests that end with the smaller bull backing off. The winner then teams up with a cow. You may have guessed by now that moose are unpredictable during the rut. They also can be downright cantankerous. Anyone pursuing moose watching during the rut should do so with caution. All this crazy rutting activity climaxes with the miracle that Mother Nature had planned, moose conception. Some 240 days later comes the proof. A new moose stands about 3 feet tall and is about 3 feet long. It may weigh from 20 to 35 pounds. Because it has a shorter neck than its mother, is much lighter colored, and has dark rings around its eyes, the calf looks more like a dog with big, erect ears and legs much too long. The new moose will be a twin perhaps a third of the time. If it is a twin or even a triplet, the moose calf may be smaller. The calf can stand within a few hours. It can wobble after its mother on its first day. After a few days, it can outrun a man. Most mother moose stay near the birth site for several days until their calves have strengthened enough to face the world. When mother does move on, the moose calf will follow, on land or in water. If its mother goes into deep water, the moose calf may balk, but it will learn to swim, or it may drown. Following and obeying is vital for the new moose. It has much to learn from its mother, and she will protect it from danger. Mother moose are defenders. Sometimes a mother moose will direct her calves to stay put as she heads into water to feed on the aquatic vegetation that is a staple of an adult moose's diet in spring and early summer. The calf will wait patiently on shore. A moose calf may seem forgotten while its mother feeds, but just you try to get near it. Nature has few mothers as protective as a moose. Anyone who gets too close to their baby is likely to regret it. The cow will flare her mane and drop her ears back on her head as she faces a threat. She may charge. She may even slash out with her forelegs. Her kick can be a killer. A mother moose will defend against a bear. Moose calf mortality due to bear attacks still occurs, however, probably as young moose are caught in surprise attacks. The calf will nurse for several months. Some calves may even nurse into their first winter, but that is unusual. Most calves are weaned by their 5th month. The calf may sample vegetation as early as its first week. Most begin to browse after a few weeks, but they rarely enter water to feed like their mothers do. By the time that May promises warmer weather, the nearly year-old moose may weigh some 400 pounds. It will have the same ragged appearance as its mother as it too begins to shed its winter coat. The yearling moose will stay with its mother till its second spring. Then, if its mother is pregnant, one day in May she will signal the moose to stop following. The yearling will persist. Its mother may charge it. She may even slap it with a hoof. The yearling will finally obey the one communication that it cannot understand: get away from me. While some mother moose may permit a yearling to accompany them at a distance, maybe even until the onset of the rutting season in the fall, most will turn their yearlings out in the spring. And so, just as the world turns warm and green again, the yearling faces its greatest challenge to date: how to fend for itself. The yearling will act subordinate to older moose that it meets. It will avoid confrontations with larger moose. Yearlings sometimes permit a close approach by humans at this bewildering time. Some even seem to enjoy having another living thing around for a while. A yearling will learn to take care of itself as summer progresses. It will gain weight and height. Its coat will thicken. It will near sexual maturity by the time of the rut. Some yearling cows might even mate during the rut. Most yearlings will survive their second winter, and by the next spring will be nearly as tall and as long as they're ever going to be. They will not reach full weight until they are about 5 years old. Otherwise, a 2-year-old moose will look about the same as all of the other adult moose. The 2-year-old bulls will begin to grow new antlers to replace those that they shed somewheres in the snow. These will be more impressive than those that they grew as a yearling. Like their sisters, they are maturing. While the less developed antlers of some bulls suggest younger animals, guessing a moose's age by his antlers is not a sure thing. Moose generally grow larger and more palmated racks of antlers with more points as they mature. The more impressive racks are commonly grown by bulls from 5 to 12 years of age. An aging bull will grow a smaller rack. But too many variations exist to rely on antlers as a sure way to tell a moose's age. Researchers rely more on an examination of a moose's teeth, not something I'd recommend for the average moose watcher. Say that you see a moose feeding in a pond and you want to get a little closer for a better look. There's a few more things about moose that it helps to know. It first helps to know that moose don't see very well. If you approach a moose that is feeding in a pond and you freeze when it looks up, it may not see you at all. That doesn't mean that you have to wear camouflage to fake out a moose. Just blend with the woods. It next helps to know that moose have excellent hearing. Be quiet and watch a moose's ears as you approach. If it pitches them towards you, it probably has discovered you. Another way to tell if a moose has discovered you is if it sniffs the air. Moose have an acute sense of smell. If you're upwind, a moose will probably know you're there long before you begin to wonder if it has spotted you. What happens when a moose does spot you? Many moose will show little reaction. Some may even be so unconcerned that they'll approach you. Others may keep a weather eye on you if you get too close. Always watch a moose's body language and don't ignore threatening looks. If a moose drops its ears and bristles its mane and approaches you, be prepared to get out of there. Moose can do great damage with their hoofs, not to mention their antlers. Find a tree to step behind or to climb if you cannot leave the scene gracefully. Moose have been clocked at 35 miles per hour. You cannot outrun one. Sometimes you can talk to moose. Moose makes several calls. The most common one for bulls is the grunt call. It's used mostly in the mating season, both to signal territory dominance and to attract a mate. But even in summer, it's a call that gets a moose's attention. Just don't try to talk to the wrong moose. Hi, I'm Bill Silliker, the fellow you heard on this tape already. Today I don't have my camera with me. In fact, I'm standing in Monson in the state of Maine with a Baxter Park ranger, a fellow named Bernard Crabtree. How are you, Bernard?
Not too bad, Bill.
Long time no see.
Beautiful day.
It sure is. We're standing right here in Bernard's backyard, and one of the questions I was going to ask you today is, do you have moose around here?
Yeah, a lot of moose in this area. Working in Baxter Park, I probably see many more up that way. It's a game preserve, and northern Maine has probably had a larger population of moose for many years than this far south, although the herd seems to be steadily growing and moving further south. I have a photographer friend in western Massachusetts that reports that they're seeing moose pretty often out that way now.
Really?
I think the last time I talked with him, he said they had a problem with a young bull practically in downtown Worcester.
How long have you been a ranger in Baxter State Park?
I've been there nearly 20 years now. I plan to retire in a few years. Yeah, I was stationed quite a while at Roaring Brook, which is near Sandy Stream Pond, one of the better ponds where the moose feed regularly. Got quite well acquainted with them there. I've had a lot of people tell me that they were homely and ugly animals, but I kind of differ with them. I think in their own way they're quite intelligent. They're a handsome animal, my estimation.
I agree. I think I've met some beautiful moose.
I think maybe I think maybe people think they're homely, maybe not too clever, but I think maybe because of their size, they don't appear to be easily frightened. The
Yeah.
world in general doesn't seem to bother them.
That was one of the things I also wanted to ask you was, you had told me before, in fact, I used it in my Maine Moose Watchers Guide, your story that you had written down of a bullfight that you'd witnessed. Would you like to tell a little of that for the camera here?
Yeah, I guess most of the fellows working the park had seen either evidence of or occasionally see a couple of bulls square off and maybe skirmish a little. And I guess I always thought it'd be something I'd like to see. But one morning, wife and I sitting in camp at Russell Pond, there was been a cow and bull in the pond for about a week, and another bull came in on the east side of the pond, and as soon as this bull reached the shore, he saw the other one across, and they immediately went toward each other. And the one that entered the pond went out on the point, stood there and lowered his antlers into bushes and thrashed his head around. And
A threatening moves, huh?
yeah, and the fellow that was already in residence there, he just turned right around and just sort of almost marched like to a drum beat along the shore toward him. And this one turned and went into the bushes. And I decided there's going to be some action. I headed out the back door and had to run over nearly a quarter of a mile to where they did meet. And they met in the alders, and they battled in the alders a couple different places for like 5 minutes to a time.
Really? That long?
And really chewed the area up. And there was patches of alder, probably a circle of 50 feet that chewed right up. Everything just ground right up.
They bashed their heads together? And
No, at that time I wasn't close enough to see them real well, but they backed back and got into one of our tent sites. And fortunately, the people that were there overnight had been gone 20 minutes or such a matter.
That's
But
good.
they got out into this open tent site, and they'd stand there kind of staring at each other, and then take a step or two ahead, lower their antlers, and just lock them together. Almost like two wrestlers when they take by the shoulders.
Yep.
And then they right down and push, just like, well, it reminded me of pulling horses.
Yeah.
The hind end right down low, legs right out back, just trembling, putting every ounce of strength into it. And they actually, from the time that I first heard them hit together to the end of the whole thing, was about 50 minutes.
Wow.
But they didn't battle continually all that time. But in this tent site, they struggled various times and separated and then back together, and sometimes would whirl around and around, apparently one trying to throw the other off his feet or something.
Sure, get the edge on
And
them.
eventually they moved back out of the site a little further up the side of the hill, and the resident, well, I always did think he was a little bigger animal, got on the upper side and pushed the other off his feet, and he broke his neck, and
He broke his neck.
was the final result of the thing.
Well, Bernard, I really appreciate your telling this story for our tape here, and I'll look forward to seeing you back in the park here next
Bill.
spring.
Yeah, always
Good
always
talking.
good to have you around.
So now you know all there is to know about moose, right? Wrong. But you should know enough about them, where they live, what they eat, how they behave, to be able to go out and find yourself a moose and have fun watching it. After you've found your first moose, see if you don't agree that there's something about moose. You just have to love moose. We've tried to show you in this video, even though I'm not sure that any video could really show you how it feels when one of these huge, hairy, wild, and ugly deer silently strolls out of the woods near at hand, looks you square in the eye, and then just walks on by. Happy moosing!